The rooster who woke the world with hope. It all began on a morning that felt colder than any in living memory. Instead of the usual cheerful clamor of early risers, our village was hushed, as though everyone had lost the will to speak. Even the leaves on the mango tree seemed to hang limply, refusing to rustle in the soft breeze. I woke up to a strange silence that made my chest feel tight, like I was holding my breath without meaning to. I stepped outside and found the usual bustle of the marketplace missing. Normally, by that hour, you'd see mothers haggling over yams, fathers chatting about the weather and crops, and children running in circles with sticks and pebbles. But that day, the stalls were barely set up, the baskets only half filled, and many people stood around in small groups, whispering in worried tones. It felt as if a heavy hand had pressed down on our village overnight, stealing away our spark of life. Grandmother always said that when a village becomes silent for no reason, it means fear has arrived. I could see it in the faces of neighbors who usually greeted each other with warm smiles. Their eyes darted around uneasily, as though expecting a hidden danger to leap out at any moment. My friend Edo stood by his family's vegetable stall, arms crossed, scanning the empty square. When I asked what was wrong, he only shook his head and sighed. A few rumors floated around. Some folks claimed they heard eerie howling in the middle of the night. Others spoke of a giant shadow passing over the moon. But no one had a clear answer, and the confusion only deepened the tension. Afternoon came, bringing a soft, golden light that usually would have warmed people's spirits. Yet the mood stayed grim. That was when I heard about Bala's strange visitor, an unfamiliar rooster that had shown up in his yard. Bala lived on the outskirts of the village, where small patches of farmland stretched out toward the forest. According to him, a tall and brightly feathered rooster strutted into his compound, as if it owned the place. Bala tried to chase it off, but the bird merely let out a single, startling crow, and then continued pecking at the dirt, refusing to budge. The news traveled fast. Our village had many roosters, but none quite like this, especially not one that wandered in from nowhere. Some said it had feathers that gleamed like polished metal. Others claimed its comb was so tall it looked like a little crown. A few whispered that maybe this rooster was a sign, either of blessing or doom. Nobody knew which. That night I found it hard to sleep. My body was tired, but my mind buzzed with the day's strange events. I kept picturing that proud, mysterious bird in Bala's yard. In the middle of the night, when the moon shone through the cracks of my window, I sat up to drink water. And that was when I heard it. A sudden, powerful crow that shook the quiet air. My heart skipped a beat. Within minutes, people were lighting oil lamps and stepping out of their huts. I followed the faint glow of lanterns and joined the crowd gathering in the village square. We all looked around, uneasy but curious. Then we saw it. There, perched on the edge of Bala's thatched roof, stood the rooster. Its feathers shimmered under the moonlight, capturing flecks of silver in every hue: red, gold, green. It crowed again, a sound so clear and commanding it made the hairs on my arms stand up. A hush spread through the crowd, but it wasn't the same fearful silence as before. This was the silence of awe, as though we were hearing a song that reminded us of something we'd forgotten: courage, or faith, or simply the will to carry on. Some of the older villagers even smiled, tears gathering at the corners of their eyes. For the first time that day, I felt hope blossom in my chest. Dawn came, and with it, the rooster's crow rang out again, this time just as the first rays of sunlight touched the rooftops. People woke up more alert, stepping outside with a sense of relief. Mothers began lighting fires for breakfast, fathers greeted each other with nods instead of frowns, and the children, previously cooped up in fear, ran out to play in the dusty paths, their shrieks echoing in the morning air. It felt like life was pouring back into our village. Over the next few days, the rooster became a local celebrity. It strutted around like it owned every corner, pecking at corn and seeds that people tossed it. Children would follow it, giggling whenever it burst into a proud crow. Even the crops seemed to perk up. Bala reported that the wilting leaves in his garden grew strong again. People began telling stories that it might be a magical rooster, sent by benevolent spirits to break our village's mysterious silence. But not everyone was happy. A small group, led by a man named Okafor, insisted the rooster was a trick. They said we should never trust something so unusual. What if it's luring us into a false sense of security? Okafor argued. He recalled ancient tales where cunning creatures arrived in villages, offered hope, and then caused terrible disasters. Although only a few villagers sided with him, their murmurs of suspicion grew louder each day. Despite Okafor's complaints, the rest of us held onto the rooster like a lifeline. We'd gather in the mornings just to hear its crow, which seemed to announce, "Wake up and live. Face the day with courage." Grandmother began telling me a new saying. Sometimes all it takes is one voice to break the silence. She believed the rooster's call reminded us that we had the power to chase away our own fears. Children became braver, traveling together to fetch water from the stream while humming songs. Mothers resumed their market chatter, gossiping cheerfully about daily life instead of worrying about unseen threats. Fathers got back to discussing weather patterns and harvest plans, their shoulders lighter than before. Okafor, however, wouldn't let it rest. One afternoon, he and a few of his closest friends cornered the rooster near the market stalls. They held sticks and wore grim expressions. When the rooster saw them, it just tilted its head, as if wondering why they looked so angry. I stood at the edge of the scene, my heart hammering in my chest. The crowd went silent, fearing a confrontation. Okafor pointed his stick at the rooster. "You don't belong here," he snarled. "We don't need your deceit. Leave before you bring more ruin to our village." The rooster remained calm. It blinked once, then crowed, a thunderous cry that startled even the bravest among us. The sound echoed off the huts, bouncing back at us in waves. People gasped, and some dropped their sticks. There was something unshakable in that crow, a loud, confident note that seemed to shatter every bit of lingering fear. Okafor lowered his arm, blinking in confusion. It was as if that single crow had cut through his anger. The bystanders breathed again, relief flooding their faces. Without another word, Okafor backed away, and the rooster resumed pecking at some scattered grains, unconcerned. That evening, instead of tension, a spirit of celebration took hold. A few families even danced around their fires, humming tunes we'd all but forgotten in the week of dread. The following weeks were filled with prosperity. The quiet gloom never returned. Bala's fields grew abundant, and people woke each morning to the rooster's hearty crow, grateful for another chance to live freely. Even Okafor softened. Though he never admitted he was wrong, I saw him a few times standing at the edge of the square, a small smile on his lips as he watched the rooster parade around. But as suddenly as it arrived, the rooster vanished. One morning, we waited for its crow, but there was only the natural dawn chorus of ordinary birds. The village gathered, searching huts, gardens, and even the forest outskirts, but found no sign of our bright feathered guest. Instead of panic, though, we felt acceptance. The rooster had already done its work, restoring our courage. We were no longer the fearful, silent people of that dreadful morning. We had learned to make our own noise, to greet each new day without trembling. Life moved on, but with a brightness that hadn't been there before. Mothers continued chatting happily in the market. Fathers planned the next season's harvest with optimism. Children woke early, playing games in the square, no longer needing a rooster's call to remind them that every dawn is a gift. Sometimes at night, when the moon is high and the air is still, I think about that rooster. I wonder if it was simply an adventurous bird or something more. A spirit sent to remind us that hope can appear in the most unexpected forms. I never found out. But does it matter? What's important is that we learned how powerful one courageous voice can be in a world shrouded by fear. Long after the rooster's departure, our village remains alive with the sound of daily routines and small joys. The memory of its confident crow lingers in our hearts, a gentle echo that wakes us to the truth. Sometimes hope arrives wearing feathers and standing on two thin legs. And if we listen closely to that call, we can find the strength to face our darkest mornings with open eyes and steady hearts.